Brian for Liberty. It has been a while. I've actually recorded a few videos I haven't put out there, but I wanted to talk to you real quick, and I'm going to give you the only argument you're ever going to need to validate free market economics over the idea of collectivism and socialism, communism, however they want to explain it, whatever ism they want to put out there for you. This is the only argument you're ever going to need. There's an interesting article here regarding the fact that certain percentage of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 63% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, including nearly half. This is the part that really gets me. Including nearly half of six-figure earners. Now, I'm going to bring this over just so you can see where I'm getting the information from. This comes from Microsoft Bing, which is slowly displacing Google as the preferred search engine. But 63% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, including nearly half of six-figure earners. If you are a six-figure earner and you're living paycheck to paycheck, that means you are bad with money. You're making poor choices. You are living beyond your means. You're living in a house that's too big, driving a car that's too nice, and you're doing these things predominantly to show off for people you probably don't even know or like. That's why you make six figures and are living paycheck to paycheck. Now, if that's nearly half of six-figure earners, that means people who are making $60,000 a year, $70,000 a year, $80,000 a year, $90,000 a year are also in this group. And in this group are also a bunch of 20-somethings in college who are supposed to be living paycheck to paycheck because they don't have any skills. They haven't really entered the workforce. They probably don't have their first grown-up job yet. So how is this an argument against the isms when most socialists, communists, collectivists will tell you that this is why we need a collective economic management? This is why we need more government intervention. Well, because what this number tells you is that most of us are not very good at managing our own lives. And that's where what this all boils down. This is what this number actually means. Most of us aren't good at managing our own lives. We're not, even if we're good at it, we're probably not great at it. And it probably takes a lot to keep it all in check. It takes a huge amount of self-discipline, some good decision-making, a tiny bit of luck, but predominantly it's about making good decisions and having some level of self-discipline. And that's what allows people to not end up living paycheck to paycheck. 63% of Americans, half of six-figure income earners, nearly half of six-figure income earners are living paycheck to paycheck. Most of us aren't great at managing our own affairs. So, based on that, it's probably a terrible idea to turn the management of the entire economy over to our collective effort. What we don't think about, or I think what socialists don't think about, I think that a lot of them are well-intentioned. I've had conversations with them. I think some of them are well-intentioned. But I think what they failed to think about the role that markets and pricing play in our economic system and how that determines where resources are going to be allocated and how it does that efficiently, not perfectly, and it does it far better than government does. So when we think about the fact that Americans aren't great at managing their own affairs, certainly not at managing their own economics, the idea that we should collectively put the entire economic system in the hands collectively of the American people is foolish. It's better to leave this in the hands of markets that will adjust and allocate resources accordingly. Now, the markets are only as good, and the products that are created and the environment that we create are only as good as the decisions made by consumers, which is very similar, of course, to our own, having us vote. The difference is, as opposed to collective ownership of the means of production, which is where we get into socialism and communism, and what we're going to do is turn everything over to a voting public to decide how to allocate resources, is that it doesn't take a huge portion of the population to create alternatives. So we have fast food, but we also have Chipotle, and we also have Tropical Grill, and we also have Subway, and we also have, which are also fast food places, but we have healthy alternatives to what you would call your traditional burger shack, because there are enough people who want that alternative exists. We have aisles of garbage at the grocery store, overly sugared cereal to pump into our kids in the morning, fake ass bread in the bread aisle, Ho-Ho's, Twinkies, whatever garbage, an entire aisle dedicated to alcohol. Why? Because consumers make terrible decisions. But we also have organic foods, and we also have health foods, and we also have vegetables available year-round because there's enough consumer demand that resources are allocated to meet that demand. So what does that mean? It means that in a market-based economy, we're going to make bad decisions, just like we do in any other, just like we would in a collective economy. But in a collective economy, once a bureaucracy takes hold of a part of the economic situation, they're not letting go no matter how bad things get. And because they have the power of force and they're essentially a monopoly, they have the power to stifle any competition or any alternatives. One of my favorite examples is, of course, public education. I rail against public education all the time. I have no desire to preserve the institution of public education. I don't care about public education. That could disappear tomorrow. I have no interest in protecting it. I don't care about teachers' unions. I don't care about any of that stuff. I care only about the educational outcomes of the kids. If public school provided the best possible educational outcomes for children, then I would be 100% supporter of public education, but it doesn't. My point is that we are all required to participate in the public education system by funding it. And it is great through a regulatory environment, at protecting itself. Because at the end of the day, like anything else, public school is just a giant government bureaucracy. So it's really good at protecting itself from competition because it has the power of force, has the advantage of being taxpayer funded, which means essentially limitless amounts of money. And so it creates this monolithic thing that only wealthy people can buy their way out of. And they resist vouchers and free market alternatives to the greatest possible extent. So when you take and collectivize an economic system, an entire economy, which would be food, housing, energy, every single part of our economy being managed by by massive voter-selected bureaucracies, that's what you end up with. You end up with this lack of competition, lack of alternative, inefficient, poorly managed entity. And the reason people are loyal to these things and oppose the free market is because it is based solely on intention. It has nothing to do with performance. It has everything to do with intention. What I mean by that is we can love government as a leftist, or actually the left and the right, but that's a whole nother conversation. But we can love government, and we can think that government is great, based solely on the fact that government's purpose is supposedly to serve the people. Now, those of us, and I think most people on the left and the right, realize that government isn't doing a very good job of serving the people. But that's its stated purpose. And so they trust government more than they trust the private sector, because the private sector's primary purpose is nefarious in their minds, and that is to make a profit. So the idea that an entity exists solely to make a profit means that entity's primary goal is evil in nature. It's nefarious in nature, whereas government, even though it is flawed, its primary purpose is noble and good. But the real definition, the real purpose of these two things is actually different. Private sector entities exist to deliver to the needs and the demands of the consumers in the most efficient way possible. That's what they want to do. What they want is to recognize or create consumer demand and then meet it as efficiently as they possibly can. That's the predominant goal of market-based enterprises. And you'll find, and I've brought this up in other videos, you'll find that in places where there's a high level of demand that the market is not responding to, what you'll find is the government standing in the way of the market coming into that sector. Education is a perfect example. People want better educational opportunities for their kids, but they're not there. And when you look at the ability to bring market solutions into education, what you find is government resisting that. So that's the market's primary goal, is actually to meet and or create consumer demand as efficiently and answer that demand as efficiently as possible. Government's primary purpose is to perpetuate itself. It is actually to grow in necessity so that it becomes viewed as something that is absolutely necessary for society to function. Government seeks power. And so every little entity in government, every little bureaucracy in government, sole purpose really is to protect its stated purpose, whether it's education. The USDA's purpose is to protect itself. The EPA's protection job isn't to protect the environment, it's to protect itself. It's to perpetuate itself. And it does that. If it can do that while benefiting the population, it will. If it does that by not benefiting, by harming the population, it'll do that too. Its primary purpose as an entity is self-perpetuation. When we look at the true goals of these two entities, it is the private market that actually has the more noble aspirations, not government. But at the end of the day, all you really have to look at is our inability to manage our own affairs and understand that any ism, any collectivization of the economy is essentially putting control of all of the assets, resources, production in the hands of a bunch of people who, for the most part, can't balance and manage their own lives. I just wanted to stop by and drop that on you for a little bit. Tell me what you think about that in the comment section. If you like what I had to say today, please like, subscribe, and share the content. And, you can turn on the notification bell because I post relatively randomly, and you're not going to be bugged a lot. Thanks again for stopping by Brian for Liberty, and we'll see you all next time.